Good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to the very first Searcy Regional Chamber of Commerce in the Know virtual series program. As you know, COVID has been a challenge for all of us, and we've not been able to have our in-person meetings. Therefore, we've come up with this, we tried to pivot and shift, those seem to be the words today, and make things available for our members. I am Buck Lane. I am the President and CEO of the Searcy Regional Chamber of Commerce, and we're glad to have you here today. We have 3 events scheduled. Obviously, the one today. We have 2 more scheduled. We have one day after tomorrow on the 23rd of September, where we're going to have the 8 candidates running for City Council here in Searcy. We're going to be excited about that. It's going to start at 9 o'clock. Go from 9 to 11. Roby Brock will be our MC. Mr. Charles Gaines will be our host and chairing that. He is our Government Affairs Committee Chair. On October 6th, Randy Zook is going to be speaking. He's going to be talking about the amendments and referendums coming up on the November 3rd ballot, and we're looking forward to that as well. Times before, we couldn't do these type of events if we didn't have sponsors. This time I'd like to thank our sponsors. We have First Security Bank, Unity Health, First Community Bank, Mize Heating and Cooling, Riverwind Bank, and Bryce Corporation. So thank you all for attending today. I'd also like to thank my staff, Tara Cathy and Jennifer Skinner, who are working behind the scenes as hosts and making things happen today. Our speaker today is Randy Ort. He is the Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer at ARDOT. We also have Bruce Street, District Engineer, with us today. Thank you guys very much for helping us. We want to appreciate y'all, and from the situation that Miss Lori Tudor was scheduled, made, and she was unable to, and you guys were able to step up, and we certainly do appreciate y'all doing that today.
Happy to be.
Randy, yeah, well, thank you very much. Randy assumed his current role in March of 2020 of this year. He is a graduate of Little Rock Northeast. He's a graduate of the University of Arkansas. He began his career at ARDOT in 1988 and served a number of positions. Probably the most well-known was the Public Information Officer from 2003 to 2015. He is married to Charlene. They have 4 kids and 6 grandkids. And again, thank you very much for what you've done for us today.
Well, thank you, Bob.
I mentioned to you a couple things. Oh, you're welcome. I want to thank you guys. Call and maybe don't thank you for what you're doing, but I do want to thank you. I've noticed a number of great things going on in our community. One is the resurfacing of Race Street and Main Street. I appreciate y'all doing it, the timeliness that you have, late evenings, that sort of thing. Also, the thinning of the trees at exit 42, clearing out the underbrush. We've had a lot of nice comments on how that looks, so thank you very much. And then the Highway 13 was a $50 million project. The ribbon cutting back in May of 18, and it's been great for our community. And we had a few questions on that too. So I'm going to ask you about 3 questions, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Randy, and also just let us know what you think, and we'll take it from there. The first question has to do with a traffic study on Highway 13. And the question that came about was, has a traffic study been done on the impact as far as the cars off of the feeder roads, if you will, or that have been reduced, and also the amount of traffic and traffic counts on Highway 13. And then also Davis Drive and North Main. We've been made aware of some challenges in the morning where people are having trouble turning off of those 2 drives onto Highway 13 and vice versa. And then a Highway 385 over in the Judsonia exit with the large hill coming down to Highway 13. A new big red convenience store has been added, and the traffic is in such that it's challenging, difficult for people to make the left turn or right turn, and actually there's been an accident there. So maybe a light turn lane, whatever. But I do want to ask you about that, and if you speak to that, and then when you get through with that, maybe we'll jump into issue 1.
All right. Sounds good, Buck. Thank you. Thank you for having us today. I think it's hopefully it's an honor to be your first participant in an online In the Know session. Either that or we're just the guinea pig. Either way, we're happy to be here. So, you know, if there's some bugs that need to be worked out, we're happy to help you debug. So thanks for having us. Yeah, it was a great day when we were able to open the entire Searcy bypass several years ago. We've got the town bypass on the west side, bypass on the north side now, and I think you're seeing some real impacts of that now. You mentioned the traffic volumes, and traffic volumes. Before you had the northern part of the bypass, you had a local road up there that had about 2,400 vehicles a day on it. And since the bypass has been built, you're looking at about 7,000 vehicles a day up there on the northern part of the bypass. So it's really made a big difference. It's made a big difference in relieving some of the traffic that you see on some of your other local streets in there. Main Street, south of Race Avenue, you've seen a reduction of traffic volumes by about 1,000 vehicles a day. Probably the biggest benefactor, I guess, would be Race Street. Traffic volumes used to be about 13,000 or now are about 13,000 and 19,000 through there. But that's about a 3,000 vehicle per day reduction from what you used to see. And of course, a lot of those are people coming from the Memphis area, headed up to the lake for the weekend, boats and trailers and things like that. So when you get vehicles like that off of those, what are basically local streets, it can really help the safety and mobility in an area. BB Caps Expressway, the same way, we're seeing about a 2,000 vehicle per day reduction in some of the traffic there. So, there are some businesses that rely on traffic, and we understand that. Hopefully no business has been hurt by some of this traffic being diverted. But by the same token, when you get some of that through traffic out of town, it can really help those local businesses, drugstores, grocery stores, things of that nature that rely on the local people who live in the area to get there. It makes it a much safer, much better environment for that. So I think we've seen some great benefits from opening the bypass a few years ago. Now, having said that, anytime you change traffic patterns, anytime you open a new roadway, it's going to change the way people move around. There's always about a year where it's brand new, where people are going to get out. They're just going to try the roadway for the fun of it, just to make sure and say they've been on it. But you've got to let those traffic patterns kind of settle in. And so, yeah, now it's time to come back and look at those. Bruce, I appreciate you being on here today. You're very familiar with that area. And it's probably time to go look at some of those intersections and see, do we need to be doing something different at Main or at Davis? Do we need to be doing something where it comes down the hill from Judsonia? So I think Bruce is in the position where he can now initiate those studies to see, is there something that we need to do to make sure that those things are functioning as safely as they can be, and yet still provide the mobility that they need to provide. So Bruce, if I touched on everything there, is there anything you want to throw in there?
Yes, sir. The only thing I'd like to add is if they want to actually request a signal at the intersection there where the new convenience stores come in, that has to be initiated by the county judge, because his jurisdiction is in that area. And a lot of people don't realize that the county judge, the governing authority, the county judge or the city mayors actually fund the maintenance of a signal. So they have to be in agreement to having one done. So that's usually what we wait on, for a signal study to be made.
All right. Buck, I trust that you or somebody can get that word out to Judge Lincoln.
Yes, sir, we will. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Great. But again, like I say, you build a new road, you celebrate the new road, but it does change things. And at the appropriate time, we're happy to get out there and take a look and see, what do we need to do? Yes, there's been benefits, but do we need to do something else to make sure it's functioning the way that it should? It's funny, you also mentioned the clearing of the trees. Anytime we start clearing vegetation, we're going to hear. Sometimes people love it. Sometimes people hate it. There's people who want everything to be all natural, and they don't want us to cut any trees or grass, wildflowers. Oh my goodness. If we cut the wildflowers before seed set, we're evil. But some people want it to look like a golf course. They want the well manicured look and everything to look, just perfect like your front yard. So it's hard to find that right balance. But I tell you where it crosses the line is when you start getting vegetation too close to the roadway, or you start getting the tree roots from that vegetation start getting underneath the shoulders of the road or the travel lanes of the road. And that's where we have to draw the line. And we're starting to see that in many areas of the state. So what you have referenced, Buck, there at exit 42, I appreciate the kind comments. I'm glad that people like that, but that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. We're going to be doing this vegetation control basically all along US Highway 67 from BB all the way up to Newport. We'll be doing the other exits right there in Searcy with the exception of exit 44, the BB Caps exit. There were some wetland issues involved when that project was undertaken, and we have some agreements in place that there's very little we can do there except just to keep everything trimmed back. So you're not going to see the same type of clearing at that exit, but you will be seeing clearing not just at the other exits there in the Searcy area, but also all along US 67 from BB up to Newport. That vegetation clearing is part of a much larger job that or actually two larger jobs we have underway right now. It's totaling about $40 million that are doing pavement rehabilitation, bridge rehabilitation, basically dramatically improving the ride quality all the way from the Lonoke County line up to Newport. So we ask people to be patient. That's probably not going to be complete till the spring of 2022. So we've still got another year and a half to go on that. But I think they'll be very pleased with the results. We're going to have a much, much improved ride quality on that entire section of US Highway 67. But the tree clearing, the vegetation control is also a part of those two contracts. So glad to hear people like what we're doing. We don't always hear those things. So thank you for pointing that out to us. What else was it that you wanted me to cover, Buck?
Well, I think that you covered most of everything we asked for there. We'll get with the judge and with the mayor and see what we can do with some of these things we ask about.
All
I
right.
know we talked a little bit earlier about issue one. That's sort of the one of the major issues coming up in the February election and the ballot. So I understand you have a presentation at this time you'd like to make.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about issue one, and thank you for leading us into that. It's a very important topic, obviously, for us, but it's a very important topic for the citizens of Arkansas. So let me see if I can get this done here. All right, hopefully I can no longer see everybody, so hopefully you can see that I'm sharing my screen and I've got the PowerPoint presentation up. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, very good, thank you. So what we're trying to do is educate the public on issue one. This is a proposed constitutional amendment that's going to be on the November 3rd, 2020 general election ballot. You know, as a state agency and as state employees, we cannot campaign for this issue. We cannot ask anybody to vote for it or to vote against it. But yet we have a duty and a responsibility to try to inform the citizens of Arkansas, the taxpayers of Arkansas, what we will do with their money. So we have to show what will happen if issue one passes, what will we do with those funds, and what happens if issue one fails? What will we then do? So that's what we're trying to do. We started out the year 2020 going around the state, have a series of 12 regional meetings, kind of town hall type meetings. Unfortunately, COVID got in the way. And after we held the first 9 of those meetings, we had to cancel the last 3. One was in Batesville, one was in Jonesboro, and the last one would have been in El Dorado. So it's been very challenging for us this year to get out and educate the public. I'm a little old school. I'd much rather be sitting down in the same room with everybody right now. But we've all learned about Zoom meetings, and I guess they have their place, and it does still allow us to try to get this word out. Issue one is very simple. Right now, there's a temporary general sales tax in place, and if issue one passes, that sales tax, rather than expiring in 2023, will continue to be collected and can only be spent on our state's highways, county roads, and city streets. So let's talk a little bit more about issue one. So why do we have the funding challenges that we have? I've been with the department for 33 years now, and my whole career, it seems like the highway department gets viewed as just having our hand out. We're always looking for more money. But the bottom line is we don't have the revenue stream that we need to not just meet the needs that we recognize, that we identify that we need to be doing. We're having trouble meeting the public's expectations. And that's always going to be difficult to do. You know, sometimes I feel like our highways get viewed almost like a public utility. You know, when I walk into a room, I flip a switch, I fully expect the lights to come on. Or when I walk up to a sink and I turn a handle, I fully expect the water to be there for me. And I think in this day and age, all of us loving our personal mobility so much, I think when we go and we get in our vehicle, we expect to be able to go where we want, when we want, in the vehicle of our choice. And we need to be able to do that on what we perceive as a good road. And it's very difficult to do, to meet the public's expectations in those ways. How did we get to this point? Having a few technical difficulties there. How did we get to this point? Well, it's pretty simple. The primary revenue source that funds our state highway improvements, county road improvements, and city street improvements is from a per gallon tax on gasoline and diesel. When you go and you fill up your vehicle, you pay a tax, so many cents per gallon, based on the amount that you buy. The problem with that is that it's your goal, it's my goal, it's everybody's goal to reduce that consumption. We want to be able to buy less fuel, but drive more. And that's basically what's happening as cars are getting more and more miles per gallon. So what we're seeing is people are traveling more, but we're not getting the revenue from it. It's about 67% of our revenue comes from this consumption-based tax. And the good news about our country's goal of reducing consumption is we're basically achieving that. But by achieving that goal, we're reducing the amount of money that we have to take care of our state highways, county roads, and city streets. So basically, our funding mechanism is flawed. It's antiquated, it's old, and it needs to be replaced with something better. So reducing consumption is happening. It's making us go backwards when it comes to the revenue that we receive, and we need to do something to address where the money comes from that we use for our infrastructure. You know, if you look at a graph of general revenue in the state, it has very, very steady growth, very few dips, and it grows at a very good clip. That's because general revenues are generally tied to our economy. And as our economy is flourishing, as businesses are doing well, there's a lot of natural growth in that tax base. As opposed to highways, the only way to get more money for our highways and our other roads and bridges is people have to buy more fuel and they have to use more fuel. But with fuel efficiency and fuel economy, they're not buying that much more, but they're driving more. And that just increases the wear and tear on our roads. So that basically explains why our revenues have stayed flat. Consumption is decreasing. Travel is still increasing, but our revenues are staying flat to decreasing. And we need to do something to change the funding mechanism for our roads. When you combine the antiquated and broken funding mechanism that we have with the cost increases we have seen in highway construction over the years, well, that's just kind of a double whammy. 20 years ago, roughly in 1998, if we had $10 million to spend on an overlay program, we could overlay about 200 miles. Today, 20 years later anyway, we could do about half that amount. So what has happened, in 2012, the voters of Arkansas went to the polls and they approved a temporary 0.5% general sales tax that is strictly dedicated to state highways, county roads, and city streets. It is a temporary tax. It went into effect in July of 2013. It is set to expire in June of 2023. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is everything that we consider, quote, highway revenue in Arkansas, that is everything from the motor fuel taxes, the registration fees, the natural gas severance tax, all those things go into a pot that we generically call highway revenue. But that money is then divided. 70% of it is what comes to the DOT, 15% goes to cities, and 15% goes to counties. So of this half-cent sales tax, temporary half-cent sales tax, the 70% that has been coming to ARDOT has been dedicated to a specific set of projects that we identified prior to the vote in 2012. In other words, we can't use that revenue for our day-to-day operations. We can't use it for routine maintenance. We can't use it to go out and do slide repair or flood damage or anything like that. We can only spend that money on these major projects that were identified prior to the vote that we call our Connecting Arkansas program, or CAP. Now contrast that with the money that goes to cities and counties, 15% to cities, 15% to counties. That is flowing into their general road and bridge budget right now. So they are relying on that money for their day-to-day operations, for buying equipment, for paying salaries, things of that nature. So that's what happened. And that kind of set the stage for the CAP, or Connecting Arkansas program. You see on the screen there a map of everything that we promised that we would do with the current temporary half-cent sales tax. I'm happy to say that we have everything underway with the exception of a couple of projects that will be getting started in 2021. So by the end of 2021, we will have everything either completed or under construction. That's a good 1.5 to 2 years before the temporary sales tax is scheduled to expire. So we feel like we made promises, we made commitments, and we have kept those promises with this money that they've given us. You know, the half-cent sales tax program, the Connecting Arkansas program, has been a real boom to the economy. We dedicated this to 31 projects around the state, about $2 billion over this 10-year period of time. These are projects of very major scale that we would not have been able to do otherwise for many, many years. By setting this money aside and making sure it doesn't get spent anywhere else, we've been able to build out, or begin building out, what we call our 4-lane grid system. So once again, we've been able to do some very major, very expensive projects that basically don't serve just local areas, but they benefit the region, they benefit the state. We're very proud of the fact that we've been able to keep our promises on that. You know, it hasn't all been in urban areas either. What you see on the screen there is a picture of Highway 167 down south in Calhoun County, kind of between Little Rock and El Dorado. So again, we've identified a 4-lane grid system that our state sorely needs, but it's difficult to find the money to go out and build that out when we have so many needs of a local nature. We're just not able to meet the needs that we have or the public expectation. If you want to know more about how we're spending the money in the CAP program, there's a website set up for that, connectingarkansasprogram.com. You can go there. It'll show you the projects where we said we'd do it, how we're doing with that, and you can get much more information along those lines. So that brings us up to today, which is actually not today, but it's 6 weeks from tomorrow. 6 weeks from tomorrow is November 3rd. And that's when people will cast their ballots for or against issue 1. So let me explain to you now what happens if issue 1 passes, what happens if issue 1 fails. It's a very simple question. A vote for issue 1, and if issue 1 passes, that means that funding from the current temporary half-cent sales tax will continue after it is set to expire in June of 2023. It won't go away. It will continue to be collected. A vote against issue 1, and if issue 1 fails, means that the funding from that current temporary sales tax will end in June of 2023. We will lose that funding. Cities and counties will lose that funding. They won't be able to do the work that they've been able to do with that. But there's a benefit for the taxpayers. A typical Arkansas household of median income is paying about $8 per month for that tax right now. So if it fails in November, then they will be saving. A typical household or family will be saving about $8 per month. If issue 1 passes, the Highway Department, Highway Commission have created what they call the Renew Arkansas Highways program. This is a 10-year look at what we will do with that money if issue 1 passes. And I want to point out that the majority of this funding, fully 76% of it, is not building new roads. It's taking care of the infrastructure, the roads and bridges that we already have. You see there pavement preservation, $3 billion over the 10 years beginning in 2023. $3 billion. That'll allow us to do about 7,000 miles of non-interstate highways just taking care of what we like to call the 4 S's, providing a good surface, good shoulders, good striping, and good signing, taking care of what we already have. 1.1 billion or $110 million a year for bridge improvements and preservation. You know, bridges are a big problem, more so in some parts of the state than others. But in this 10-year period, if issue 1 passes, we'll be able to address all of our weight restricted and deficient bridges in the state. So at the end of that 10-year period, we would not have any weight restricted bridges on the state highway system. That is a huge boom, particularly for our agricultural industry here in the state. Interstate maintenance will be able to dedicate about $1 billion or $100 million a year. Many of you can remember back in 1999, Arkansas literally had some of the worst interstate highways in the country. And it's at that time that the people went to the polls and they actually voted to allow us to issue bonds to take care of our interstates. We had not had any debt towards our roadways. We had not issued any bonds in 50 years. But we had to do that because we had to do something. And we have gone from literally having the worst interstate highways in the country to really having one of the best interstate systems in the country. Now, we did that in 1999 and again in 2011 by issuing debt, selling bonds to do that. But if issue 1 passes, we'll be able to continue that same level of improvement, about $1 billion over 10 years or $100 million a year, strictly dedicated to keep our interstates in the state of good repair. The 4th category there you see is we call safety improvements. Now, safety is obviously a major component of every project that we let out here, but there are some areas that are problem areas, and this will be able to dedicate $500 million over that 10 years to things like high accident rate locations or dangerous intersections, things of that nature. Those first 4 categories that I mentioned, that's 76% of the total funding available right there, just taking care of what we already have. The last category that you see there, capital and congestion relief, this will allow us to initiate another, we're calling it CAP 2, Connecting Arkansas Program 2, $1.8 billion over 10 years. Basically the same level of funding we have right now for the current Connecting Arkansas program, but allow us to continue some of the progress we've made there, continue building out parts of our 4-lane grid system, continue to address some congestion that we have in many areas of the state. This map shows you in brown those first 4 categories of funding, taking care of our existing system. This is what we can do over the next 10 years, addressing all those bridges that are in poor condition and have weight restrictions, and doing a lot of pavement preservation, keeping our current system, taking care of what we already have. This is the real beauty of our program, of issue 1, being able to take care of what we already have. Now, this is the map that people like to talk about. This is the 24% of the funding, available funding, that will be used towards a second Connecting Arkansas program. And there's some very, very vital projects on here. We're going to continue some widening on Highway 64, trying to get it widened from West Memphis all the way back over to Wynn. Be able to do some work on Interstate 40, $475 million dedicated to adding a 3rd lane in each direction between North Little Rock and West Memphis. And $475 million is a lot of money. That's not going to build the 3rd lane for the entire length of that, but it will address us to get allow us to get a good start on that and address some of those really high truck volume locations that we have. But as you can see, this is major work. Once again, you see in the upper right-hand part of the state there, the northeast corner, the hashed out oval that we have, that is continuing 67 to interstate standards from Walnut Ridge, Hoxley, all the way up to the state line. We don't have a specific route identified yet. We're getting very close to announcing that. But there's money in this program that allow us to complete that to interstate standards up to the state line. So this is the map that people really, really like to talk about. Everybody likes new roads, new bridges, new construction. And this is very important. But I want to stress that 76% of the funding is going to this right here, taking care of the system that we already have in place, a very large system. Some would say too large of a system for the state that we have, but it is what we have and we need to take care of it. But this is a very vital component too. This is going to provide economic development, provide jobs. This is a very important component for our state. All right, let's talk about if issue 1 fails. First and foremost, we won't receive the money that we're currently receiving will go away. So for state highways in 2023, where we'll have $740 million available, in 2024, that's going to drop down to $535 million. That means that most of those routes on that blue map are going to go away, and a lot of the routes on that brown map are going to have to be altered too. The Highway Commission is going to kind of have to go back to the drawing board and decide how to spend the money we have available. City streets and county roads, though, are taking a very, very big hit. You'll see about a $44 million reduction in funding for city streets and reduction for county roads. Let's look more closely at White County and the city of Searcy. The judge is going to have about $1 million a year less in his road and bridge budget if issue 1 fails. You can ask Judge Lincoln how that's going to impact him. Ask the mayor of Searcy how losing $500,000 a year is going to impact the road and bridge budget in Searcy. So while this is touted as a highway initiative, this has huge impacts on the funding for county roads and city streets as well. So I think everybody needs to understand that. So what are some of the key takeaways here? Obviously, we've explained or tried to explain what we can do if issue 1 passes, and we continue to have that revenue available. It is currently costing a typical household in Arkansas about $8 per month. If issue 1 passes, that amount will not increase, it will not decrease. If issue 1 fails, that family can save about $8 a month or about $100 a year. The tax currently does not apply to groceries. It will not apply to groceries if issue 1 passes. And the good thing is this money is dedicated and can only be spent on road improvements, whether those are state highways, county roads, or city streets. Since this is a proposed constitutional amendment, the legislature will not be able to change where that funding goes. It is dedicated to that source. The people, of course, could vote to change it, or the people, of course, can vote to make it go away, even if it passes this November. So the governor has done his job. He created this program. He is standing behind this program. You will see him on campaign ads out front. Legislature has done their job. They have addressed some funding. Some new funding was passed in the 2019 legislative session. We're very appreciative of that. But then they did their job also by passing this constitutional amendment out to let the people decide, to let the people vote. Now, I've got a short embedded video here I'm going to try to play. I'll just tell you on the front end, it works fine when we're doing it in person. It's about a 50-50 shot whether it plays when we do these meetings virtually. So I'm going to try it. If it doesn't start playing, I'm going to skip right on over it and we'll keep going.
Arkansas, where work ethic is passed down through generations and innovation is encouraged young, where companies can start small and become international businesses. Year after year, the state is growing, but its foundation, thousands of highway miles, is crumbling, making roads dangerous and in desperate need of repair. So working across the aisle with leaders across Arkansas, Governor Asa Hutchinson paved the way for a solution.
And yet today in 2019, we're passing a highway plan of $300 million to the state of Arkansas to support the maintenance and construction of highways and infrastructure. But it also includes a referral to the voters that they can make the decision and gives them the final say-so.
Not only will this program create thousands of construction jobs, it's also set to generate billions of dollars in economic activity, helping people and products move efficiently and compete in the 21st century economy, all without raising taxes. Together, we can create more jobs, build better roads, and make a safer Arkansas for our growing population. And under this plan, all Arkansans benefit. Renew Arkansas Highways.
Well, on my end, it looked like it played, so I hope it did. But I'm going to end the presentation there, Buck. We're going to come back and we'll see if people have questions. Be happy to try to answer any questions that we can. There we go.
Okay, great.
Play on your end?
The video worked great. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Everything
Good.
was fine there. Bruce, I failed to ask you earlier on some local projects. Or is there anything you would like to say in regard to that? I've spoken with our city engineer, Mark Lane, and he's given me a kind of a laundry list here, Recreation Way and Country Club Road and reconstruction of North Main and Davis and asphalt milling, overlay of city streets. Do you want to speak to any of that?
Well, y'all have a laundry list, I'd say. Not specifically, I mean, the amount of work that we've been able to do in White County and specifically in and around Searcy has just been tremendous. And I'm really thankful that we're able to do that down there. Y'all are a thriving part of the district, and we think we have a really good working relationship with Mr. Lane and the county judge. And we just take it as we come. With things that come available to do, we're glad to be able to do it. But I don't have anything specifically for any of those projects to address or anything.
Well, that's perfectly all right. We certainly do appreciate what you've done. You mentioned questions, Randy. I'm not sure if we do have any questions. Does anybody have any questions? It's on the call right now, or on the on the Zoom call.
Yeah, I have a comment and a question.
Okay.
I think it's become evident with the challenges of COVID, and then just even other states and dealing with their formula for how they're going to fund their highway programs. But it just looks like Arkansas has a pretty good recipe going right now to overcome a lot of the challenges that other states are facing with funding. And this sales tax plays a big part in that. It's here now. So I'd just like to get your take on comparing to other Department of Transportations around that you know of, and how they're situated right now for being able to, is a very important method for getting the federal match that we have to get. There may be federal dollars out there that other states may not be able to claim, that Arkansas might be in a position to do so. So just curious how you look at our recipe for making this work versus other states.
Well, I appreciate the comment and the question. It's quite a challenge. There's 50 states, and by the time you count the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, there's 52 DOTs, and there's 52 ways to fund their roads. Everybody does it different. You're going to find some things that are going to be the same everywhere. Every state that I know of charges a per gallon tax on motor fuels. Now that tax rate's going to vary, but every state does that. I believe every state that I know of charges registration fee. So if you get a vehicle, you pay annually to be able to use that, to legally use that on the government provided roads. But from there, things can really, really differ. Oklahoma, for example, up until recently, part of their personal income tax was dedicated towards funding highways. It's interesting. We have the 12th largest highway system in the country. Some of you have heard this before, but we rank 41st in revenue to support that system. 12th largest system. We got 16,400 miles of highway. People find it hard to believe that that's larger than the highway system that the DOT is responsible for in states like California and New York and Ohio and Florida. But yet they have a huge local road network in those states. They generate a lot of money. They got a lot more people, a bigger population base. So there's really not a recipe on how to do it. You do have several states that are starting to tap into what's traditionally referred to as general revenue. That's something we got into with the temporary sales tax. It seems to be well received. Especially during COVID, I think we've seen how important our transportation system is, even when people didn't get out and drive. We see the delivery services that are providing the food delivery services, the Amazons of the world that are still getting services, getting products out to people at their homes, even if the people aren't driving. So I think our transportation system is more than just the citizens fueling up at the pump. And that's the problem we've had. We've got a system, a funding mechanism that is antiquated. It's based on the way it started back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And we've got to do something to broaden that base to everybody that benefits from the transportation system pays a little. So I think when this was voted in 2012, nobody envisioned at that point in time that it would vote to be extended. There were other things that were going to be looked at. None of those played out. And the governor said, the people are paying it. They're seeing the benefit of it. Let's ask them, give them the opportunity to extend that. So that's where we are with that. You mentioned federal match, Paul. I'm very happy to say that, you know, when the federal money, don't be deceived. It comes from your pocket and my pocket when we go to the pump. That's where the federal funds come from. But it goes to Washington, and it does get a portion back to the state. And we do get our money back from Washington. But you're right, it requires a state match. So when we have a project that's, let's just say it costs $100 for that project and it's federally funded, we pay for the project with $100 state money, but we get reimbursed 80% of that back. You got to have that 20% match to be able to use your federal funds. I'm very happy to say here in Arkansas, we have never lost a penny of federal funding from not being able to provide that match. It happens in other states, and we actually become the benefactor each year in August. Just this year, we're receiving a few $1 million, quote, extra money, if you will, from states that had to turn their federal funds back because they were not able to utilize them, were not able to provide state match. So we've always been the benefactor of that, and hopefully we always will be. That number one goal here is to never lose federal funds. We've got to provide that match. That would be a travesty if the money that came from you and me went to Washington to come back, wasn't able to come back, and it went to some other state. We're not going to let that happen.
That's a great question, Paul. Are there any other questions from anyone joining us today?
I'll go again. Take a project like the 57 corridor, which I think for White County, we may underestimate what a boon that could be for our county growth, and the city of Searcy being right on what would be an interstate. But if you took just a project like that without this funding source being established or renewed, how long would it take for that project to be completed on the Arkansas portion under this program and then without it being available to us?
Okay, let me just use it as an example. I'll use US Highway 67. I grew up in North Little Rock, and I have relatives in Northeast Arkansas. And every Sunday, it seemed like when I was a small child, we would drive to Northeast Arkansas, but we didn't have the US Highway 67 as we know it now. That to me is what I call the quintessential pay-as-you-go road. It took us 40 years to go 80 miles from North Little Rock up to Newport. We've since expanded that, extended it on up to Walnut Ridge Hoxie. I wish I knew the date off the top of my head of when we opened it up to Walnut Ridge Hoxie, but it's been several years and it's still sitting there because it's going to be very expensive to get from there up to the state line. A program like Issue 1 with this amount of funding coming in, it's about a 68% increase in funding for ARDOT. That gives us the money to be able to tackle big projects like that. The temporary sales tax right now is allowing us to address so many of those major projects. And if we're able to continue to receive revenue from that, Highway 67 is a classic example. It's the quintessential classic pay-as-you-go project. We've got to have a major program like this, a major influx of money to be able to see something like that coming. And you're exactly right. Changing out that black and white US highway sign to a red, white, and blue interstate sign means a lot to communities. It means a lot to people looking where they want to place their business, where they want to expand their business. So we're very excited to hopefully make that happen sooner rather than later if Issue 1 passes.
Anyone else with any questions for these gentlemen?
Anyone else? Or Paul, you can go again. You're doing great.
Well, I do want to let everybody know, if you're not aware, both the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Corporation here in Searcy passed resolutions earlier in the year in support of issue 1. So the Chamber and our Economic Development Group are committed to it. We're 100%. We want to urge all our members to vote for this. We think it's very important for the state and for our city and county governments, as was shown on the PowerPoint slide. And we just want to thank Randy, and we want to thank you, Bruce, as well. Does anybody have any other comments that they would like to make before we adjourn? Okay, we are recording this. We do hope to get it out on YouTube and our website, and hopefully a few other things, but we're trying not to overcommit at this point in time. So we're taking it one step at a time. But I want to thank you guys again very much for taking the time to spend a little time with us and explain to us about issue 1. And hopefully we can do this again in the near future. I want to remind everybody about our candidates forum on Wednesday of this week, and then Randy Zook coming up on October 6th, and State Chamber of Commerce. And I want to thank our sponsors once again. We have First Security Bank, we have Unity Health, First Community Bank, Mize Heating and Air, Riverwind Bank, and Bryce Corporation. And thank you all very much. I think this concludes our first ever visual in the know meeting, and look forward to doing another on Wednesday. Thank you all very much.
All right. Thank you, Bud.
You bet.